Start. Here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes knight check. Knight takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. G4 check. Knight takes knight check. Answer to this puzzle is G4 check. King to G2. Knight takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. Rook takes pawn. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn check. Checks in puzzle position are queen takes pawn check. Answer to this puzzle is knight to D7. Queen takes knight. Rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Another puzzle. The threats are bishop takes pawn check. Queen takes bishop check. Queen takes pawn check. Queen takes knight. Checks in puzzle position are bishop takes pawn check. Queen takes bishop check. Queen takes pawn check. The best move in puzzle position is bishop takes pawn check. Knight takes bishop. Knight to F3. Queen takes knight. Queen takes queen. Next, here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Knight takes pawn check. Knight takes bishop check. The checks are rook to F8 check. Queen to F5 check. Queen to F4 check. Queen to F3 check. Queen to G2 check. Queen to H1 check. Knight takes pawn check. Knight takes bishop check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to H1 check. Bishop to G1. Rook to F8 check. Let's continue. The threats are bishop takes knight. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes bishop check. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn check. The checks are rook takes bishop check. Rook to D2 check. Queen takes pawn check. Queen to F2 check. Queen to G1 check. Queen to E2 check. Queen to D2 check. Solution to the puzzle is rook takes bishop check. Pawn takes rook. Queen takes pawn check. King to G1. Queen takes pawn check. Queen to G2. Rook to G3. Next, here are the threats. Rook takes pawn check. Queen takes rook check. Queen takes pawn check. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn check. Bishop to H6 check. Queen to F4 check. Queen to E3 check. Queen to D2 check. Queen takes rook check. Queen takes pawn check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes pawn check. Bishop takes rook. Queen takes bishop check. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Knight takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is knight to B4. Bishop takes pawn check. King takes bishop. Queen to B3. Bishop takes pawn. Another one. Here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes knight. Rook takes bishop. Rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are rook to E6 check. Rook to D8 check. Rook to D4 check. Answer to this puzzle is rook takes knight. King takes rook. Rook takes bishop check. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are pawn takes knight. Bishop takes knight. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is pawn takes knight. Rook takes rook. Queen takes rook. Bishop takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. Knight to F5. Pawn takes bishop. Knight takes rook. Pawn takes knight. Let's continue. Here are the threats. Knight takes knight. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight takes knight. Pawn takes knight. King to E2. F5. G3. One more. The threats are queen takes pawn check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Checks in this position are queen takes pawn check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to C5. Queen to E2. Bishop to C4. Queen to F2. Bishop takes rook.
Another puzzle.
Threats in puzzle position are: bishop takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, knight takes bishop, knight takes pawn, rook takes knight.
There are no checks in this position.
The best move in puzzle position is rook to e2, bishop to b7, rook takes knight, bishop takes rook, rook takes bishop. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: there are no threats in this position.
There are no checks in this position.
The answer is knight to c4, knight to d6,
c2.
rook takes pawn, check, king to h6, knight takes knight, promotes to queen. One more. Threats in this position are: bishop takes queen.
There are no checks in this position.
Solution to the puzzle is: bishop takes queen, rook takes queen, king to c7, rook takes pawn, bishop takes rook. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn, check.
Checks in puzzle position are:
knight to e6, check, knight to e6, check, knight takes pawn, check, queen to c3, check. The best move in puzzle position is knight to e6, check, king to h7, knight takes queen, bishop takes knight, check, queen takes bishop. Next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: bishop takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, check, queen takes pawn.
The checks are:
queen takes pawn, check. The answer is queen takes pawn. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in this position are: there are no threats in this position.
There are no checks in this position.
Here is the solution to the puzzle: king to d4,
b3, f3.
Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are: queen takes knight, check, queen takes pawn, queen takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn.
Here are the checks:
queen takes knight, check, queen to f8, check. The best move in puzzle position is bishop to g4, queen to e8, queen takes pawn, check, bishop to d7, bishop to e6. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in this position are: there are no threats in this position.
Here are checks in puzzle position:
bishop to e7, check. The best move in puzzle position is
d5,
rook to c4, rook to c1, rook to a4, bishop to d4, check. Let us go to the next puzzle.
Let us look at threats in puzzle position:
queen takes pawn, queen takes pawn, queen takes pawn, rook takes bishop, check.
Here are checks in puzzle position:
queen to f7, check, queen to g8, check, rook takes bishop, check. Answer to this puzzle is rook takes bishop, check, pawn takes rook, bishop to h6, check, king to e8, rook to e1. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: pawn takes pawn.
There are no checks in this position.
Answer to this puzzle is pawn takes pawn, king to f1, king to c7, king to e2, king to b6, king to d3, king takes pawn. Next, the threats are: there are no threats in this position.
There are no checks in this position.
The best move in puzzle position is c5. Next puzzle. The threats are: rook takes rook, check, queen takes knight, knight takes knight.
The checks are:
rook takes rook, check. The answer is knight takes knight, queen to h5, knight takes bishop, queen takes pawn, check, king to h8, rook takes rook, check, bishop takes rook, queen takes rook, knight takes bishop. Let's continue. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: rook takes rook.
There are no checks in this position.
Answer to this puzzle is rook takes rook, pawn takes rook, king takes pawn, king to h4,
a5, g4,
pawn takes pawn. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position: queen takes bishop, check, queen takes bishop, check.
The checks are:
queen takes bishop, check, queen to d6, check, queen to d7, check, Queen to d8, check. Queen to g5, check. Queen takes bishop, check. Bishop to g5, check. Solution to the puzzle is bishop to g5, check. Rook to f6. Queen to d7, check. King to f8. Bishop takes rook.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.